I think I prefer the sort of maybe something like that.
Something like that?
Yeah, I think I prefer that size.
Do you want to sit on that then?
Mainly on that, yeah. We'll go to the other size cases to start with.
Okay, I'm rolling.
Okay, so we'll start on that, but mainly on the other.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. So first of all, if you could give me your name and your title.
My name is Niels Harrit. I'm 66 years old. I have served as associate professor at the chemistry department of University of Copenhagen for 42 years. And I have just retired recently on September 1st. But I still have my office and some students left, and my research is still running.
So on screen, you would be associate professor of chemistry at Copenhagen University.
Emeritus. I'm retired.
Emeritus professor.
Emeritus, associate professor, emeritus.
Right. Okay, there's a limit to what we can put a bit in, but yeah, you are associate, you're emeritus.
I'm retired,
yeah.
It doesn't matter. I still have my office.
I see.
Still there.
Yeah, okay. And your specialism when you were there, what was?
Well, this is photochemistry. Chemistry and with light. Chemical processes induced by light. And physical consequences of light absorption, which is kind of abstract eventually, but photosynthesis is an example of a photochemical reaction.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, just doing general questions first, as I mentioned yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think happened on 9/11?
I don't know. The point is that we're dealing with the killing of 3,000 people, and it has never been investigated as a crime. There's never been a forensic investigation of that day. And whatever happened, we have to wait for that. But there are hundreds of circumstances and observations.
Niels, please, not tap your phone.
The tapping will be picked up on the mic.
I beg your pardon, but we will pick it up. Thank you.
Just let me ask that question again. What do you think happened on 9/11? Do you agree with the official account?
No, I don't. The official account is that America was attacked by 19 young hijackers, guided by Osama bin Laden. And for once, we haven't seen one single forensic proof for this conspiracy theory to be correct.
Not one bit of proof?
Not one bit of forensic proof.
But I thought there's actually quite a lot of facts out there.
Well, why haven't we heard about them? I haven't. But I have heard about and seen and been involved in the production of hundreds of observations and facts and circumstances which violates the official conspiracy theory. And that's why we are waiting for a criminal investigation of the crime. And until this occurs, we should stay open for whatever it will lead us.
So you don't believe? What do you think happened to the Twin Towers? Why do you think
they were the three high-rises? There were two airliners, but there were three skyscrapers, and all three of them unambitiously were taken down in controlled demolitions.
Controlled demolition?
Meaning that you take down the building by the application of incendiaries and explosives.
And is there evidence that explosives and incendiaries were used?
Plenty. Yeah, in abundance.
And who would want to plant those?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not talking about people or politics. I'm talking about facts and observations, physics and chemistry.
But it could be the builders put it in when they built it?
Well, if in case, why don't the government tell us that?
Mm.
They could just tell us it. And if you believe this happened in the 1950s for the towers, okay, why don't they tell us?
Why would anyone want? I can't see why anyone would want to plant a bomb in a building to kill American citizens. Why?
Neither do I. I mean, this is beyond my realm of expertise.
It seems, as some people might say, absurd.
Well, some people. But some people have difficulties with see what they actually see. And what you should do, if you have problems, is just to watch. There were 3 high-rises, but there were only 2 airliners. Now you don't have to have a PhD in physics to count to 3, okay? So what happened to Building 7, which was roughly a little less than half the height of the Twin Towers? It collapsed on its own 7 hours after the North Tower. And the way it came down, unambitiously, indicates that it was a controlled demolition. There is no way a steel-framed high-riser can come down due to fire. And it's very easy to understand, because over history there's been many fires in steel-framed high-rises. And each time you're doing an experiment. And this is what we scientists, we love experiments. Each fire in a steel-framed high-riser was an experiment. And you make an observation when the fire is over, the building is still there. This even happened in the Twin Towers and many other high-rises. Each time you're drawing the conclusion, the building did not come down. The experiment is being repeated many, many times. And in science, when you have repeated the experiment over and over again, you come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is that a steel-framed high-riser does not collapse due to fire. And that's it. We could stop here, basically. And the rest of it is extra, is what we call supplementary information. Because just from these basic observations, you can conclude that a steel-framed high-riser does not collapse due to fire. And that's it.
Because it looks like a controlled demolition.
Listen, you didn't understand that we have made the experiment with the high-rises, and they do not come down due to fire. That is one thing.
Has there ever been a partial collapse of a high-rise steel-frame building?
A partial collapse?
Has there ever been one?
Yes, and particularly what you call composite buildings, where you both have concrete and steel frame. Then the concrete
Which bit collapses? Which bit collapses then? Does the steel frame actually collapse?
It depends on where.
But it does, I can tell you it does, because I think there have been clear examples where the steel frame building has collapsed.
That's not true. I'm sorry, it's not true. If you want to bring out an example, it is probably what we call composite buildings. What are your examples?
No, there are low rises where low rise steel frame have collapsed. There are high rise where the concrete centre has stayed intact, but the steel frame outer has collapsed around it.
Now we're going into details.
Well, details are important. Aren't facts important to you?
But you're aiming, in this case, you're probably aiming at the Windsor Tower in Madrid. But then
that's one example where you can see exactly that.
But the point there is, you are taking us into details. But the point there is that the upper 16 floors of the Windsor Tower, the floors were concrete, and they went down, and leaving alone the front, the steel front, completely unsupported. And that is not a steel frame, my friend. This is a composite building. You are not. I'm calling for an example of a genuine steel frame building which had collapsed due to fire. Mm-hmm. Please.
Well, and there are other examples where I haven't got all the names listed, but I can come back to you with that with other buildings where they
appreciate that,
because the various international groups that look at engineering have not high rise. I accept that. There haven't been high rise, but there have been other. The basic principle that's operating there, which is that when steel is heated beyond about 600 degrees centigrade, it loses about half its strength, which is basic physics and science, which you like. And when that happens, the building loses some of its stability. Yeah. If left, that can cause the building to collapse.
But it doesn't.
And it does in some low rises. It has, and in most high rises where it's happened, there've been very few fires in high rises. The longest one where it's been when it didn't have a fire service treating the fire, at WTC 7, where it's burned for 7 hours and wasn't treated by the fire service, that did collapse.
Not due to the fires.
Well, that's your argument, but equally NIST looked at it for many years and suggests that it did.
Look, it came down, Building 7, take an example. But I want to dispute what you just said about high-rises collapsing due to fires. For once, 2 points here. When you have a steel roof, of course it comes down. But British steel, which is respected, or was, it's not called British steel anymore, but they did actually a series of experiments.
Cardington experiments.
Exactly, the Cardington experiments. Over 7 years, over 8 years, they made 7 controlled experiments where they built 8-story, full-scale steel frames and burned them under completely controlled demolitions, meaning that you could actually record temperatures within the steel. In the worst case scenario, they had temperatures of 1100 degrees.
How long did they have them for?
11 hours. 1100, please wait, 1100 degrees centigrade within the steel. At that point, steel is spaghetti, boiled spaghetti. But the building remains standing.
And how long did they have those temperatures for?
Hours. But
no, this is important. How long, do you know how long they had them at that temperature for?
We can go and look up the...
I would suggest you do have a look at that at some point, because that is an example where the factor actually is very important, because I did go to the building research institute that carried that out, spoke to the engineer who carried that out.
Yeah.
And if you look at those papers in detail, you'll see how long they were held at that temperature for. Let me finish the point. Because it's quite important, because it's a fact.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at an experiment like that, it isn't just a matter of the temperature it reaches, it's how long it's held at that temperature for.
It goes the other way.
And I think you'll find it's more than just a couple of hours.
It goes the other way round. It is you who have to produce an example of a steel-framed high-riser ever having collapsed due to fire. And you cannot. And the Stars Tower stood for 56 minutes. Come on. There has been no reported example of steel-framed high-rises collapsing due to fire. And it was not Building 7.
The process is clear. The example of a high-rise is right. There hasn't been until WT7. There is no high-rise steel frame building having collapsed. However, the process is clear. The example you give of the Carding experiments is wrong, because you incorrectly state the number of hours that it was held at that temperature.
Nope.
And if you have a look at it, you'll find that they didn't have it at that temperature for very long.
It didn't collapse, okay? The Cardington fires.
That's because you need to look at how long it was held at that temperature.
Okay. You have to produce an example of a steel frame which collapsed due to fire. And you cannot. And that is the bottom line, because it is not me who has to present a steel frame which has...
So do you honestly believe that if you held a steel frame building and you have temperatures that are over 600 degrees on whole floors, that you then, if you maintain that temperature for say 7 hours, that the building will be intact? Do you really believe that?
Well, it happened.
Would you be happy to stay in a building at the top of that, say a 50-floor building, in a standard steel frame building yourself, and then would you not take the stairs and exit?
Of course I would.
You would stay in it because you would know it's so safe.
No. Please, when you're saying that the first building ever to collapse due to fire, a steel frame, was Building 7. Okay, that's what you said. And you're claiming that...
It's not me. It's what others have claimed. I mean, it's what NIST have claimed. It's what other authorities have.
You just said that Building 7 came down. Okay, and you're talking about roaring fires. It is not true. It was minor, random, small fires, but it is not personal.
What's that based on? That suggestion that small fires.
You should look at the pictures.
I have looked at the pictures.
Very good. Then we must agree that they were small, random fires.
I don't agree with that. No.
Okay. But it doesn't matter.
Well, it does matter, because that's fairly important as to how big the fires were and how widespread. You based you based that suggestion of the fires being small and not over many floors on looking at some pictures. Yeah, that's your scientific analysis based on a few pictures.
I'm looking at pictures. Of course. I mean, no, I'm looking at all the available pictures. I have read the NIST report.
Yeah.
I'm expressing the conclusion of NIST. And these are small, random fires. But it is not important, because the way the building comes down tells all.
The look of it.
And the rate, the acceleration. The building is coming down in free fall. This is number one observation. For
almost free fall.
No. Actually, no. It is straight free fall for almost 2.5 seconds.
Almost. Yeah, exactly. Almost. And then it isn't at free fall.
It is free fall.
Yeah.
It is, and
you say it right yourself when you say it's almost free fall for about 3 seconds.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I did not say that.
Just to use the word almost.
No. For almost 2.5 seconds. Yeah. It was within free fall.
Okay, I understand.
It was within free fall.
Yeah.
For say a little more than 2 seconds. Okay? And it was completely free fall. It was within 1% of free fall on Manhattan.
I see. So it's not quite. Yeah.
And this is a completely unambitious proof that you had controlled demolition. Because at that time, when the whole building symmetrically goes from complete rest directly into free fall, at that moment, all the supporting structure must have been eliminated. And the last part of, at least the last part of the supporting structure must have been eliminated by explosives. Otherwise, you cannot see a complete symmetrical going down in free fall. Now we are talking basic physics here. We are talking about Sir Isaac Newton, your countryman, professor of Cambridge. His tomb is in Westminster Abbey, and for good reasons, because he wrote a book in 1687, which we call Principia, which is the basic book of science in the world as we live in here, or is the physical world we live in here. And what we are talking about here is his fundamental laws and the implication of that. Newton has been right for 350 years. He has never lost a game. So the conclusion, based on this observation, is that the building was brought down by explosives.
And the official report by NIST suggests that there was an internal collapse of many floors before that, so which allowed it to collapse in the way it did. You've read the report, that's what it talks about, an internal collapse, isn't it?
But it doesn't make any difference.
You discount that?
No, because...
You think they made it up?
Yeah, I do. I think that the NIST report is scientifically so flawed that I would call it a fraud. It's a scientific fraud. It's a conscious cover-up.
So
no doubt.
You're accusing the people who worked on it, Dr. Shyam Sunder and the other people who worked on it, of being fraudulent, of being deliberately covering up what actually happened.
Yeah. Quite frankly.
It's quite a serious allegation, isn't it?
It is.
And what evidence do you think they deliberately covered up?
Oh, that is a long story. And we have, I'm not alone in this. There are 1,500 architects and engineers behind this claim. Richard Gage, you know this organization. And I consider it scientific mainstream that Building 7 came down in a controlled demolition. And you can go through the NIST report page by page, and you can see how they're suppressing, twisting, making deliberate and undeliberate errors, downright errors. And it is, and of course we have, I'm not alone, there are thousands of scientists behind this. And we have pointed on all the faults. It is not, of course, in the mainstream media. You find this information on the web, because the mainstream media do not want to report this. For some reason or other, you should be better to answer that. But it's, I stand behind my accusation, yes, absolutely.
And tell me about, just going through some more general points in there, let me just talk about, you talked about the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. What do you think has happened to the those who question the official account. How would you characterise how that movement has changed over the last 10 years?
The movement has changed. It's been growing. It's growing every day. The hundreds of people are seeing on their own. Each one is acting on their own. Nobody's telling anyone to act. Each one is acting out from an inner voice telling me there's something wrong here. If you have seen Building 7, there's no way back. You can try to put it away. I haven't seen it, but it's always there. And Building 7 is coming down in free fall. Obviously controlled demolition. So you can try to cheat on yourself, or you can speak up and live with dignity.
And what convinced you that the official account wasn't?
I saw Building 7, it's 4 years ago. And I had two problems immediately. One thing is that up until that point, I thought that the World Trade Center were the Twin Towers. Like everybody else, most people actually in the world. And I was told that this was World Trade Center. And what I saw was a gigantic skyscraper. From Danish standards, it's 3 times taller than any building we have around here. Coming down. And why should this be World Trade Center? Why have nobody told me about this before? This goes to BBC. And the other thing was that I, as a natural scientist, I'm trained to try to understand whatever goes on around me. This is my instinct, always trying to understand what's going on. And I couldn't understand why this building standing there. The last seconds there are not even small fires. There's no smoke, there's no nothing. You just see the building going down, and you can actually see the explosions are running from the bottom up on the north side. You just watch. But at that time I didn't understand. I just said, hey, what's going on? So I had to look into it. This is the bent of my nature. And after a couple of weeks, I understood that this is the most important event in my lifetime. And from that moment on, there's been no way back.
And do you feel sort of driven by this?
I'm driven by 2 things. First, I'm opposed to crime. And we are talking about the killing of 3,000 people. And it has never been investigated as a crime. That we have been presented for no evidence. There's been no grand jury, and nobody has been wanted for the terror attack. Osama bin Laden has never been wanted for it due to the lack of evidence. That's one thing. I'm opposed to crime. Next, I have 6 grandchildren. And in a couple of years, they'll be old enough to ask me, grandfather, which side were you on? And I'm going to answer them, I was on your side.
So do you believe that there were 19 hijackers? Do you accept the official account that there were 19 hijackers and they did hijack 4 airplanes?
There is no evidence. There is no evidence that these 19 hijackers ever got on these planes. There are no tickets, they're not on the original manifestos. There are no boarding passes. There are no ground hostess telling them they're boarding. There are no videos of them going through security. The one you might refer to is from Portland. There is no evidence that they would be able to take over 4 airliners at the same time within a half an hour or something and prevent 8 adult, trained, seasoned pilots from just pushing the hijack button. There is no evidence how these young men who had never flown an airliner before could hit the Twin Towers. It is like threading a needle on a horseback at 900 kilometers at 60 kilometers an hour. There is no evidence explaining why the American Air Force remained on the ground for 1.5 hours. Under ordinary circumstances, they would be up and intercepting within 10 minutes. And they stood still for 1.5 hours. There is no evidence explaining why an airliner, Flight 77, after having flown around in the most supervised airspace on the Earth were able to slam into the most strongest surveyed and protected and defended building in the world, the Pentagon. And it was flown by a pilot who couldn't even rent a Cessna. He was not allowed to rent, and it is doing a completely crazy maneuver in the last step, making 270 degrees turning and diving at the same time. And you want me to believe that? If this was the script of an action movie, wouldn't you run to the ticket office screaming and ask for your money back?
So, do you think that civilian airplanes did crash into those buildings?
Do I believe that?
Civilian airplanes, the American Airlines, United Airlines.
Right, sure, of course. There were two airliners.
Some people don't believe that.
Obviously, they use. Of course, there were two airliners crashing into the towers.
And one into the Pentagon, one that crashed at Shakespeare.
Pentagon, we are still missing the evidence for that. But there's a lot of discussion about what happened at the Pentagon, and I did not touch that. I don't know. We're still waiting for all the camera footage which Pentagon confiscated immediately. We're waiting to see that, and if the government will release these videos, I think it will help a lot. For instance, and we haven't seen the wreckage.
But at the moment, you're not convinced that there was even a plane, a civilian airplane, American Airlines 77. You don't think that necessarily hit the Pentagon.
I'm a scientist, and all my statements and convictions are based on positive evidence. And what I'm saying, we have to wait for the positive evidence. I'm saying that there is, up until now, there's no evidence for that. And that's where I stop. I'm waiting for positive evidence.
So if I gave you evidence, would you be convinced by that?
Of course, the world would.
Okay, well, I spoke to the special agent who's in charge of gathering evidence from the FBI, who was in charge of gathering evidence from the scene afterwards. She picked up parts of the plane. She picked up, some had distinctive lettering from the American Airlines plane. She picked up body parts. She picked up uniforms, bits of uniforms.
Why haven't they displayed it?
What, the body parts of some people.
Taste business.
But okay, well, the FBI has shown me, and I have film of it, of a section of the fuselage from American Airlines 77.
I'll put it up for public discussion.
Would that convince you?
That depends. Of course, I have to see it. Of course. But the official story, which you must agree upon, is what I just told. It's in the 9/11 Commission report, right? Okay, and that's what I relate to. You asked me in the beginning about evidence pro the official conspiracy theory, and I said there is none, and I said there is plenty of evidence against it, and all the time I'm talking about positive evidence. Now the official account.
So you exclude what the FBI special agent is saying. Is that not positive evidence? Someone who's actually there.
I suggest if the FBI have evidence, they should present it to the public. Of course.
A witness who was there. Is that not evidence?
No,
you don't trust someone. Is that basically what it comes down to?
I'm a natural scientist. My convictions are based on hard evidence. You can buy any opinion out there.
So a witness who actually sees things, witnesses things, that doesn't count for anything?
Of course.
It does count in a court of law.
Yeah. Yes. But take a woman like April Gallup, who actually walked out the hole with her baby after the event at Pentagon. And she didn't see any wreckage. And that's witnesses. And there are many other witnesses opposing that there was an airline. But please, we are into territory now where there is contradicting witnesses. And I say, I base everything I'm saying here as hard evidence. And you're dragging me into a situation where there is no hard evidence.
Well, I've seen and I've spoken to witnesses and I've seen things myself, which is very hard evidence. I've spoken to a structural engineer who was there after seeing, I don't think you were there, That's pretty clear evidence from someone who's there. And I think to discount someone who's actually there as a witness
This is secondary evidence. You have spoken to somebody who has seen the evidence. Show me the evidence. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Everybody should want that.
Well, a court of law wouldn't work on that basis, would it? A court of law wouldn't work on the basis that would discount a witness who was actually there.
But can we agree?
Would it?
Very good.
I wouldn't agree on that, no, because a court of law works on the basis. That's how all courts of law right across the world. A witness is fairly essential to it. If you discount all witnesses, then of course you're not going to see any evidence, are you?
Great.
Yeah.
You want the court of law. So do I. So let's set the court of law and bring in the witnesses. Can we agree on that?
Well, it's not for me to decide what. So I go and ask people and ask the questions, and when people are happy to talk to me, then I'm delighted to talk to them. But what I find strange is that you are not willing to accept the word of someone who's a clear witness to something.
You were referring to the court of law, and we can agree on that. So let us set up the grand jury, bring in the witnesses, and take it from there.
Yeah, but the point I'm asking is, why can't you accept that a witness who's there, an eyewitness? Why don't you accept an eyewitness just because they're an official?
What are we talking about now?
Well, they're like the FBI special agent who was on the scene.
Well, the FBI
gathering bits of plane, gathering bits of body parts, gathering bits of uniform from people who have been blown up from their life. That's pretty tragic. That's pretty vital and real. And you just to dismiss that as though that doesn't count strikes me as rather flippant with facts.
The FBI agent has seen this. I have.
Yes, but what I'm asking you is why shouldn't you therefore listen to that FBI agent and take note of it and change your views because of that?
Because I want this FBI agent to come into the courtroom and present his evidence in front of the judges. And I'm not taking any stand on this.
But why should she come into a court? She doesn't.
Why should I take a stand on this? Because she should come into the court, because what I'm talking about is a court with what you call subpoena power. So the court should ask the FBI agent to come in and present her evidence. And all I'm asking for, and this is what I'm waiting for. I'm not taking a stand of you as the second reference of some FBI agent who said something, and you want me to relate to that. Isn't this a bit far?
Not really. I mean, she said it on camera. She's an eyewitness to it at the time. How good do you want someone who's actually there?
I want
holding body parts, holding uniforms, holding bits of airplane. I mean, I don't know.
It's off, Mike.
Okay, it's done. Just changed it.
Change that.
Hullet. Niels, hullet. Pentagon-hullet.
Yeah, we're not going to take a Pentagon. You're derailing.
Sorry?
You're running off rails.
Why do you think I'm running off rails? You don't. I mean, the Pentagon is a fairly important area to ask questions about, isn't it? I mean, you
Actually, it is the important thing, but the government is done in scientific circles to run it off.
Why is it least important?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
It's just a sense. Everyone can see that there's something fishy there. It's quite obvious.
Well, I didn't see it. I mean, that's. I'd be interested to know what is fishy about it. Then I'll ask you that question.
Why did it happen?
Whether in terms of
how can the most protected building in the world?
Don't tell me now. I'll save it because I'd like to hear you say it on camera.
Når vi taler om vidner, så Barry Jennings.
Yeah, Barry Jennings, yeah. Talking about witnesses.
Let's put the bars on, Mike.
Okay, yeah. 20 seconds.
Har du bånden op, Julia?
Ja. FBI-agenter.
Yeah.
Finish reframe up, Mike. We'll crack on. Just a second. Focus. Okay, camera's rolling.
So we were just asking about the Pentagon, Niels. The facts seem fairly clear. What happened there? The official account does seem to check out with all the facts that are there.
Really? I disagree.
And why do you think it doesn't? Why do you think the official account doesn't seem to hold true at the Pentagon?
Well, I've said this already. I find it unbelievable that a pilot which was not allowed to rent a Cessna could fly a Boeing 757 and make a 270 degrees turn and dive at the same time and slam it into the building. It's an impossible maneuver. I don't believe that it should be possible for an airliner to attack the most protected and best defended building in the world. And so if the government wants me to believe that, I suggest that they release the more than 80 videos, as I understand, video cameras actually monitoring this building. They just relieve the footage of the Boeing and that's it. And until then, I'm just waiting for the hard evidence.
So where did the airliner go?
I don't know.
American 77 disappeared, or?
Well, please. I'm referring to hard evidence. I'm not doing any speculations. I'm just waiting for the hard evidence.
But there were passengers on it. There was an American Airlines 77. Did have passengers on it. Had pilots on it. Where did it possibly go if it didn't crash into the Pentagon?
I'm a physicist and chemist. I specialize in the collapse of the World Trade Center. And all these discussions about the airliners and the passengers, and there's plenty to talk about. I suggest that you take in other specialists who know more about that. We can go on for hours discussing this. And the problem here is that there are conflicting evidence out there. Okay? And most of it is conflicting with the official story.
That's not what I've found, but
well,
that's your opinion.
It is, definitely. But until further, I think that it is unbelievable that an airliner should be allowed to fly around for 1.5 hours and then slam into Donald Rumsfeld's own office building. I don't believe that this was just an accident.
I've spoken to an air traffic controller, and he explained why they failed, and they did fail. It was a failure to launch aircraft to intercept.
Okay.
And the explanation is fairly clear, that there was a lack of communication. And
there's been written books about it. Please.
But you just don't accept that. You know the explanation, but it doesn't mean anything to you.
I don't believe that the American people is paying billions of dollars to the most effective air force in the world, and they should fail on such a simple occasion like this.
Okay. And you sort of question whether there were indeed 19 hijackers. And a few months ago, we heard news that Osama bin Laden had been killed. Do you believe that he was killed by US Navy SEALs then?
I believe that Osama bin Laden died more than 9 years ago. Probably on December the 12th or 13th, 2001.
Way back then, and what happened to him after that?
He died.
What were the Americans hunting for after that? They had a big operation to try and hunt for him. The CIA, the FBI involved in a large hunt for Osama bin Laden. What were they doing? Were they just doing that for a joke?
You should. Why don't you ask them?
I did ask them.
Oh, please.
And they said they were insulted by the suggestion they would not be doing. They were not working to try and find Osama bin Laden.
Well,
they say it was absurd.
I apologize if I have insulted anybody. I'm talking about hard evidence from start to end.
They said they had hard evidence when they were there. They had DNA. They they physically ID'd the person, and his wife at the time shouted out his name.
Why don't they show us?
And if they showed it, would you be convinced? Or would
Yes.
you then say we want a court of law and something else?
Of course, it should be. Of course, he should be convicted. He has never been charged. And somebody called the FBI way back, a reporter called Ed Harrit, and he asked the FBI, "Now, why is Osama bin Laden not wanted for 9/11?" And the spokesman called Rex Tom answered quite bluntly, because FBI does not have any hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden with the terror attacks on 9/11, and that's it. This is FBI admitting they do not have any hard evidence for this, and we haven't seen any hard evidence either.
You don't think Al Qaeda was involved in 9/11 at all?
We're going into the political realm now.
I think it's not the political arena. I think it's it's the official account of what happened. Official account of what happened absolutely essentially says that Al Qaeda was responsible for 9/11.
Of course not. Yeah, of course. I have not seen any evidence that the 19 hijackers. Actually, I know an a person from Iceland who has put out a reward of 10,000 pounds sterling to anyone who can produce hard evidence for that the 19 hijackers actually boarded these planes, and his money is still in the bank. So if you can present hard evidence that the 19 hijackers went on board these planes, you can earn 10,000 pounds sterling like that.
I suppose it depends what you call the evidence. Though there's video evidence. There is video evidence.
No.
There's evidence where their names are on the list. There's names where, but it depends what you see. You don't accept certain things that other people would call evidence. And then there's evidence of the things that have been collected from the World Trade Center on the ground, which and you don't accept that again, do you?
His passport. Do you accept that? They are finding the passport beneath the towers before the collapse. So you think that the hijacker, flying at 960 miles per hour, tells his co-pilot a few seconds before impact, "I just have to pull out my passport." He's rolling down the window, throwing out the passport, and it is accidentally just found on the sidewalks. Is that the story you accept?
So the passport was planted.
I asked you, is this a story you accept, or do you think that the passport survived the blast of the jet fuel and flew out through the flames and landed on the sidewalks? This is what you believe? Are you serious?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
I think, well, that's the official account. Is that not the official account?
Well, if you accept the official account there, we disagree. I beg to differ.
But the point is if evidence is presented to you, and I guess this guy in Iceland, you decide whether you think it's evidence or not.
Of course.
It's like I might go and speak to a witness. You haven't spoken to any witnesses from. I don't think you've actually spoken to any witnesses who were there at let's say the Pentagon. But if I go and speak to someone, you say, well, they're not a witness that I accept.
We're talking about...
You have a different approach to what is evidence, and you dismiss anything that I suggest to you. It seems a strange way of operating.
You suggest that the passport found from one of the hijackers, besides World Trade Center, belonged to a hijacker who had just flown an airliner at 960 kilometers per hour into a high-rise, and he rode down the building and took out the passport and threw it out. This is what you accept?
No, I don't accept that. No.
You just said that.
No, I accept it was found afterwards, and it would have been. It's quite possible that it was ejected from the plane. Why not? Why not?
Because I just outlined the scenario that you would flunk any exam, my friend, at even elementary school in physics and chemistry. This is completely beyond imagination.
And you didn't quite answer the question I was asking in terms of Al Qaeda. You don't think that Al Qaeda was involved in any way in 9/11?
I'm expecting for evidence, please. We must have an investigation.
So at the moment, do you think there's any evidence that Al Qaeda was involved in 9/11?
No. And all evidence is against it.
Against what? Sorry.
Against the 19 hijackers. I'm not talking about Al Qaeda. I'm talking about the 19 young men who, according to the official conspiracy theory, this was a conspiracy. Okay, 19 people.
Conspiracy, yeah.
Conspiracy.
Yeah.
It was a conspiracy. Okay, when 19 people agrees of making a crime, it's conspiracy. And it's a theory. The only occasion actually where some evidence was presented, according to NATO, was at a meeting on October the 2nd in Brussels. The story of how NATO got into this war starts on September the 12th, less than 24 hours after the impact, at a meeting in Brussels, where the North Atlantic Assembly met and agreed upon a statement saying that provided if the attack was directed from abroad, they considered it as an attack on the whole alliance area, and and Article 5 of the NATO Treaty was activated. Now which obviously they had somebody in, they had a suspect, but there were no proofs yet. This was officially provided by Frank Taylor, who was the title of ambassador, an American employee from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who came to Brussels on October the 2nd and presented the evidence that this attack was directed from abroad, which should have been Afghanistan, by Osama bin Laden. The meeting was closed, and the minutes from the report from the meeting has never been published. It is classified. On October the 4th, Lord Robertson, at that time Secretary General of NATO, came forward and said that we have seen the evidence and we accept that the attack was directed from abroad, and now we consider Article 5 of the NATO Treaty to be in operation. From that moment on, my country was at war with Afghanistan. But we, the public and the soldiers who were fighting for their lives, have not seen the evidence yet presented by Frank Taylor. And what I suggest is that they show us the evidence. We haven't seen it yet. And that is the story how my country got into Afghanistan. And this is the only political statement I'm ready to put forward here. Denmark has the highest number of casualties in Afghanistan relative to our population. Okay, we're fighting in Helmand. And I think that we owe the soldiers why we're there. And it was originally Operation in 2002, the hunt down for Bin Laden. And the Danes were there already at that time.
Okay. The final general point for I want to get onto your particular research just about is the fourth plane that went down at Shanksville, crashed at Shanksville. Do you believe that was a civilian airplane, and do you believe it crashed into the ground at Shanksville?
There was no wreckage. The people who came out actually to look at the wreckage, they went home after 20 minutes because there was nobody there. The coroner said, well, I'm finished, there's no job for me, they just went home.
He said, I think he said there were parts of body parts, there were small parts of wreckage there, and people did carry on working. The coroner, who we have spoken to before, said there was a tragic scene there, and there was clear evidence that the plane had crashed.
Over 7 square kilometers. The wreckage was spread over 7 square kilometers.
What sort of wreckage was spread over 7 kilometers?
The airline.
Yeah. What? So parts of metal and parts of engines were found over 7 square kilometers, were they?
Yeah, spread all over. I'm not very much into flight.
I've not seen that. That's not the evidence I've ever seen.
Okay.
The only evidence I've seen is that small parts of insulation, things that could be blown in by the wind, were found a few miles away.
I think you should compare with other airline crashes then.
The point you're making is that, are you suggesting that something other, if it didn't crash there at Shanksville?
I don't believe that, no.
Did it crash where?
I don't have no idea.
Shot out of the sky?
Could be.
Taken off to Barbados or something?
No, come on. I'm not speculating. I'm all the time. I have to repeat it again and again. Show me the evidence. And the side you're pointing at regarding Flight 93, there just ain't no wreckage. And that's it. That's where it stops for me. Show me the evidence, the hard evidence. Don't bring rumors about
the coroner.
Witnesses. Yeah, but the coroner has to...
The person who was there, again, a sort of person, you don't accept the coroner, an eyewitness who was there?
Oh.
You did call him to your aid a second ago, but when he seems to say something against you, you didn't then dismiss him.
No, but this is what I recall what the coroner said. So if we are in a dispute about witnesses, I think we should fall back on the hard evidence, because this is all we got.
Okay. There are parts of the plane found at the scene.
And wait for the grand jury.
Yeah. And there are parts of the plane found at the scene.
Wonderful. Let's wait for the grand jury.
Isn't that hard evidence?
Let's wait for the grand jury.
Well, you see, the point is there may not be any need for a grand jury if the evidence is already there.
What?
If the evidence is already there.
What?
You don't think there's evidence, but everyone else does.
What? If you have a crime, and would you say that there is no need for an investigation?
What crime?
Killing of 3,000 people, even more.
By who?
I don't know. This is why we need an investigation.
Well, because most people accept that there wasn't... The only crime was committed was by 19 hijackers.
Yesterday, a poll was published. There's just been a poll among the New Yorkers. You might not know this. And when the New Yorkers was asked, do you want a new investigation into tonight? 48% voted yes. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
Okay, it came in last night. This is half the population of New York. And you're talking about most people accepting?
Accepting the official account?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm talking about half the population of New York. And this is hard evidence. This is a poll which was just been published last night, and you don't know. And you think that everybody is accepting.
What's the last national poll then you can point to?
Oh, I'm not a specialist in
So I thought you were just asking me whether you were just questioning whether I should know something happened yesterday. You don't know the last 10 years when there was the last national poll of the US.
I don't think that it costs money, and that nobody has come up with the money to do that.
Well, there has been actually, but
Maybe.
you don't know about it. Okay, you just wanted to make a point, score a point, but there has, and it was a Scripps poll, and it found around about just over 30% of people thought that either the US government allowed or in some way caused 9/11 to happen.
And this is 4 years ago. This was 2007.
Right.
So apparently the percentage has...
Well, I don't know what I haven't seen it, so I don't know what exactly the question is. The question you were suggesting there is a different question to the one that Scripps asked, which is a very wide question. It's a completely different question, isn't it?
You said that most people accept the official story.
Based on what? Based on the Scripps national poll. There is no national poll since then that I'm aware of. If you are, then correct me. You're talking about a poll in New York asking whether there should be an investigation, another investigation, which is a different question.
As an example.
But it is a question in New York. It's not a national poll of the US, is it?
No, of course not.
Okay,
but it's an
I
example.
don't know. It seemed a strange point to make. But if you want to, we're clear then. Final sort of general point. So I've spoken to a former CIA member who was deputy in charge of the counter-terrorist centre, Philip Mudd. And he said the idea that the US government was in some way involved in conspiracy is, in his words, beyond imagination. The facts point in another way. Suggest anything else is, in his words, despicable.
Excuse me?
Despicable.
What does that mean?
Just Insulting, I think, is another
His
word.
words.
Yes, his words. He used the word despicable. Despicable.
Well, I mean, he's talking about his own imagination.
He's talking about the suggestion that a lot of people have that you would agree with, who have suggested in some way the CIA or the FBI or the US government in any shape or form has been involved in the conspiracy to kill its own citizens.
Well, he's talking about his. I apologize if the millions of people who are questioning the official story are insulting anyone, but I can only apologize on my own behalf.
But suggesting that, and I think you are suggesting, that they had a hand in murdering American citizens.
I think it's more offensive actually that you want me to believe that a hijacker can throw out his passport at 900, 600 miles per hour. You're insulting my intelligence coming up with stuff like that. Well, I think as a representative of BBC, you're a member of the press, and you're even, as I understand, you're referring to many years of experience as a producer by BBC. I think that you should stick to your role as what you call the fourth estate, and be ready to ask questions no matter where they lead.
I'm glad you ask any questions, that no matter where they lead.
Okay.
I'm asking you questions.
No.
But that's the point he made to me, and I wanted your response to that. Which, someone who's spent their life working for the governments, like him, and there are other members of the US government and the FBI, find it beyond the pale, find it offensive to suggest that they spent the last 9 years hunting for a person who didn't exist, that they somehow had a part in killing American citizens, which is what you are suggesting.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm asking for an investigation, and on the contrary, I think that all these people fighting for their countries, including Denmark, need to see, must be presented for the hard evidence they're fighting for. I think that I am doing the person you're referring to a great service by asking questions. I think he deserves actually an investigation, doesn't he?
Well, I don't think he's asking for one.
So
He doesn't feel the need.
Why is he offended that actually the basic for his own work should be?
To be clear, what he said to me is that he doesn't see anything wrong with you asking questions. He's quite happy for you to ask as many questions you want. But the opinion that people then have, the theory that people have, which is basically, you suggest there were explosives and incendiaries planted in 3 buildings at the World Trade Center to kill American people, must have been carried out by someone. You actually don't like to suggest that it could have been carried out by the obvious implicated person. And other people who present alternatives will say this.
Look.
They say it's the US government in shape or form. They say, the distant figure of Cheney and others in a small cabal were present. Ultimately, what you're saying is the US government killed its own people.
It's the other way around. It was a crime to kill 3,000 people. And I suppose that both you and I want the truth. Agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what's wrong with suggesting a criminal investigation of the crime?
That's your request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm not discussing other people's feelings. And I cannot relate to anybody's feeling in that connection. I'm opposed to crime.
But who possibly could have wanted to carry out an attack like 9/11 apart from Al-Qaeda?
I think this is what the investigation is all about.
Give me one explanation. I don't see any.
Well,
give me one explanation. Why would you want to do it? What benefit would it have for President Bush?
I'm a political scientist. Excuse me. I'm a natural scientist. I'm not discussing politics.
So you can't see any.
I am presenting. It is my duty. Actually, I'm an official, to bring my expertise and my knowledge to the public. And this is my duty. As it is your duty to put questions on any explanation which is out there. And I'm all the time talking about hard evidence. I'm not talking about rumors. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm calling for an investigation of a crime. This is completely beyond.
But to have any crime, as you would like to call it, one of the basic aspects of any crime is to have a motive. I don't see any motive.
Well, this is your problem.
Yeah. Is it? I don't see it. It may be a problem with philosophy, but if you don't see a motive, I mean, it's not the point is not me, but I mean, in any crime, you would look for a motive. You haven't looked for a motive?
Before you investigate?
Well, as you investigate, it's one of the essential points of it. Isn't it essential in any criminal investigation to have a motive?
If a person is killed, do you think the police is coming and asking for a motive before they start investigating?
And you don't think they'd ask for a motive in their investigation?
No, but I suggest that you start investigating before asking for a motive. Isn't that natural? You might look for a motive during the course of investigation, but to start an investigation, 3,000 people were killed. Don't you think that should be investigated? Just because you have a limited imagination, should that refrain or prevent the police from investigating the crime?
So it was investigated by the 9/11 Commission. It was investigated by NIST on several occasions over many years, over the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars.
The 9/11 Commission was a political commission, and it was not investigating the crime. And it failed, trying to make an account of what happened on the day and trying to take measures that it should not happen again. And the 9/11 Commission report is also deeply flawed, but this has been considered by other people. I know you have met with David Ray Griffin, and he's the expert on that. Now, regarding the NIST report, which addresses the technical aspects, and this is where I come in because I have read it, I would not hesitate to call scientific fraud. It's a cover-up. I stand on that.
But you can't see any motive. You can't see. You can't see any motive to do this. This horrific crime. To kill 3,000 people, it's a pretty serious allegation, but you can't see a motive.
To start a criminal investigation, you don't have to have a motive before you start. Agree on that?
It's every criminal investigator I've ever seen that it looks to a motive.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't you be, as an investigator yourself, looking for a motive?
No, I will not be investigating.
I would. I look for a motive. I don't see one.
Please, but you're not in the FBI.
No, I'm not in the FBI.
So let's leave it to the police.
No, but I'm asking questions. I ask a question. It's a straightforward question. It's a straightforward. I thought it's a straightforward answer, but you don't see any motive.
But your only reference is your own lack of imagination.
Okay, give me an example of any possible motive for it.
No. I'm just saying that the facts are, the hard evidence are that 3,000 people were killed, and I'm opposed to crime, and I just suggest that we have criminal investigation.
Well, I say the obligation is on your part, actually. The other way around is that the official explanation is fairly clear. It's very clear indeed. There's all the people I've ever spoken to in terms of eyewitnesses there, and actual evidence when I've seen things points to backs up the official account. And you have to prove that there's not only something could have carried out, you have to show why it would be carried out. That's absolutely basic. You have to try and persuade people, but you're not willing to engage in that for some strange reason. I don't know why. Maybe because it's fanciful if you suggest it. Because it might seem absurd. Is that the worry?
Well, if you have problems with your own imagination, I think this is not.
I have plenty of imagination, but I don't want to drift into the realms of absurdity.
Of course.
So, do you accept it's absurd to come up with a motive?
I think it is absurd, as I just told you before, that the whole scenery, including the 19 hijackers going into the 4 airliners, for which there is absolutely no evidence should be taken from the top. They outfoxed FBI, CIA, 16 intelligence agencies. They got past the ticket control. There are no tickets. They're not on the original flight manifest. There are no boarding passes. There are no ground hostesses seeing them boarding the planes. There are no video evidence for them going on board the plane. They're taking over 4 airliners within, I think, half an hour. They're overcoming 8 very mature, strong airline pilots, 4 of them with military backgrounds, and none of these 8 airlines pilots can just slip the hijack switch when they're overcome by these young men, and they are slamming 2 of them into the Twin Towers at a rate of 960 kilometers per hour. This is like threading a needle on a horseback. You just cannot do that. And as I told you about Pentagon, that you have a pilot, we're talking about the official account now, and what you are ready to believe. You're ready to believe that a person who could not rent a Cessna flew a Boeing 757, he had never been in the cockpit before, and he could make a maneuver where he's going around 290 degrees and diving at the same time several kilometers and slamming it into the best protected and supervised surveyed building in the world after having been flying around in the airspace for 1.5 hours, slamming it into the Pentagon. And this is what you believe. And you are
That's
talking,
the official account, isn't it?
This is what you believe, and you are talking about imagination.
I didn't say imagination. I'm just asking a simple question. What possible motive? What possible motive is there for planting explosives and incendiaries in the World Trade Center?
I'm not calling for. I'm not dealing with motives. I'm dealing with hard evidence, and I promise you, there is no way that the 3 high-rises could come down due to the impact of the 2 airliners. It's against basic laws of physics, and it's against all the observations.
And you don't have a single explanation as to why Melanie might want to do it, which is strange, but there we are. So Niels, how many samples did your paper look at?
The work in the paper is based on 5 samples. And but due to this chain of custody, which I found ridiculous actually to document, during the writing up of the paper, the other guys, some of the other authors, was very meticulous, wanted to have this chain of custody in place, which meaning that each individual who provided the samples had to fill out a form, and they were interviewed on camera, where and how they found it. I think, should anybody question the authenticity of the samples? I have published more than 60 papers. Never in my lifetime have I run into a situation like this where somebody eventually would accuse us of falsifying and spiking the samples. I just couldn't imagine. But the other guys insisted on this. Now the 5th of these 5 samples, the 5th person did not want it to stand up publicly and sign these forms. So all results from this 5th sample were pulled out of the final publication.
So it's based on
4 samples.
4 samples in the end, right? And where were those found?
Yeah, you can see here.
No, I don't want to. Sorry, you have to assume that you're talking to a wider audience. They can't. I'm not going to tell people to refer to.
It's very easy because this is the south of Manhattan.
Yeah.
And you can see where the samples are found.
Yeah.
That's it.
So they're all found in the south of Manhattan, around the site,
Actually,
in various number of days or weeks afterwards.
No. Actually, the youngest one was, I think, about 20 minutes after the collapse of the North Tower. Actually, before the building 7, the 3rd tower collapsed. And the 2 next was the next day, and the 4th was from Janet McKinley's apartment, and she came back to that apartment a week after the collapse, but she lived very close to the South Tower. which is important for the quality, actually of the samples.
And how did they scoop up the dust they found?
They saved it in a plastic bag. It's all in the paper. I mean, you can and you don't have to be a scientist to read that.
But it was done. You're happy with the way it was collected.
Well, yeah, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't consider the samples. We have had other samples which have been collected, we just say with less scrutiny, and we don't look at them. We take a look at them. They have to be collected and stored coolly and properly.
Okay. So take me through briefly the research you did and the conclusions you made from it.
Well, we're talking about the findings on some tiny chips. We call them chips. These are flakes. And we call them red grey chips because they're red on one side and they're grey on the other side. It's the red side which is interesting because it shows all the signs of being a thermitic material. I'm sorry I have to use some technical terms here because this is inevitable and I also have to be incorrect. Now, thermite, would you let me explain what thermite is? Okay, it is actually an old discovery. It goes back to 1996. The German chemist Hans Goldschmidt.
1896, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Start again. What is thermite?
Well, thermite is an old discovery. It goes back to 1896, when the German chemist called Hans Goldschmidt discovered that a mixture of very finely divided aluminum and finely divided iron oxide, which is rust, when ignited, burns at 2,500 degrees centigrade, which is very, very hot. Actually, it is roughly 1,000 degrees above the melting point of iron, and molten iron is produced in the thermitic process. It's very useful. It can be used for welding. Was patented in 1898 and used in 1899 for welding tram rails in Essen in Germany. But because the iron produced in the process is so overwhelmingly hot, it can always also be used to destruct other items, typically armor. So for that reason, the thermite reaction has been used for military purposes for a long, long time. Now, what we found...
What did the military use it for, exactly?
Well, like torpedoes and grenades. Actually, not so long ago, there was an event in Korea where, according to the official story, a torpedo was... the South Korean vessel was torpedoed by a North Korean vessel. And one of the, as I understand, one of the proofs for this have happened was that the South Korean in the wreckage had found aluminum oxide, which is the other product of the thermite reaction. So this is just one example. But the findings we have found is a modern version of the same, basically the same chemical reaction. The thermite reaction is not a specific reaction, actually, it's a whole family of reactions. But in this case, this material that we have found is a modern high-tech version of which is exploiting the same chemical reaction. And the most pertinent and obvious discovery we found is that the chips are reactive. They still react. We also found some of them which have reacted partly, and where you can actually see the iron being produced in the process. And this is this is unambitious proof that these materials, they're very, very small. We're talking about millimeters and less. So you need a microscope actually to find them in the dust, and some experience and some skill to find them out. But so the research has been difficult because the sample simply are so small. But there are techniques in electron microscopy where you can investigate this and you can monitor the reaction itself.
What were the main techniques you used to look at those red chips?
Well, first you have descriptive You're describing the material, basically optical microscopy, electron microscopy, and the various techniques which are used there. And also, as I told you, that the most important observation is the reactivity. When you heat the chips up, they take off, they react. I will not call it an explosion, we do not know, but they react violently and show all the characteristics of a thermite reaction. And this is done in an apparatus which is called the differential scanning calorimeter. And beyond that, what else can I think this covers the whole family.
And at the end of that, what was your conclusion about what those chips were?
A scientific work, a scientific paper, is a set of data, a discussion of the data, and the best hypothesis you can come up with. And based on the data and the discussion, the hypothesis that we have come up with is that this is unreacted thermitic material, and it has not been challenged. The basic conclusion has not been challenged over the last 2 years since it came out.
I mean, you gave an explanation of what thermite is. People question. Thermite is an incendiary, isn't it? Not an explosive.
That's correct. Yeah, and you have to distinguish between explosives and incendiaries.
And
I claim that the controlled demolitions of the 3 high-rises and both incendiaries and explosives were used out of necessity, based on your observations.
So it could have been brought down just by the thermite.
No, because you just watch, use your eyes and be ready to see what you actually see. Regarding the towers, for instance, what you're seeing there, you're seeing steel beams and girders being thrown out and hurled away 100, 200 meters. And we are talking about fragments of tons, 4, 10, 15 tons being thrown 100 meters away like a spike going into the building on the other side of the street. And this means that some energy is involved. You can see the explosions actually running in front of the crush zone as we're talking about the Twin Towers now, how they're being blown up from the top down. You can actually see the squibs running in front of the crush zone all the way down. Some people think that the towers came down by what you call the pile driver theory. So the top actually crushed its way down through the tower.
Like if you dropped a hammer on a plate, that dynamic load.
Yeah, but for once, there is no top section. Just look at the video. There is no top section. Also,
were you looking at Twin Towers, or you're talking about Building 7 now?
No. We're talking about the towers now. Yeah. And we come back to Building 7 in a
There's
second.
no top section, I don't understand that, sorry. No.
If you watch, I can show you the video. I suggest you put the video in, like the North Tower, when it collapses, there just ain't no top section. And if you take the South Tower, take the clip taken, the video taken from a helicopter to the south, you can see for once the explosions. You can see the explosions occurring in the top sections above the impact point of the airliner. You can see this top section starts tilting on the South Tower. It starts tilting. Now, if something starts tilting, it would continue and actually fall to the ground in one piece. It doesn't. It disappears in open air. There ain't no, and this is only observations. If you make calculations on the energy for the pile driver theory just isn't there. I can give you the numbers. I have in my head, but if you care, how much energy is available, the potential energy, and it just isn't there.
Okay. Stick with your
Building 7.
Okay.
Yeah. What are the indication of explosives and incendiaries? What you see, Building 7 is coming down in perfectly free fall for more than 2 seconds from the start. This is only possible if a whole series of charges have fired with a very exaggerated time sequence and taking out eventually the last supporting structure of the building. When the 47th story starts to move, there is nothing supporting it as it's going down like this. Imagine. Can only be accomplished. And it is the whole building. It's the whole building going down like that. There are 24 core columns. There are 57 perimeter columns all the way down. At that moment, nothing is supporting the 47th floor. And it comes down completely symmetrically. There is absolutely no way this could have happened.
Or it couldn't support the dynamic load above it.
Pardon?
Or it couldn't support the dynamic
47.
load above it.
There's no load above.
There's no load above it. There's no floors above it.
No.
Oh, clearly there are.
We're talking about 7.
Yes, I'm talking about 7.
The 47th floor was the top floor. There are no floors
Okay,
above the top
no
floor.
floors above that was just the penthouse. No, of course. But on the lower floors there are clearly is dynamic load working on those that.
Yeah, but the 47th floor, there is nothing supporting it. All the supporting structure is gone at that time. There is no way
You see an internal collapse at the top where the pentagons, you see an internal collapse at the top where the penthouse starts to move down and there's an internal crack, and you see a crack with it, and it goes down from inside.
Yes, I'm not claiming that the whole structure.
So the structure could have been weakened and it could just be collapsed.
Of course. I'm not claiming that the whole structure, of course not, that the whole structure is taken out like that. What I'm saying is the last supporting structure is taken out like that. I'm saying that at the moment, the seismic track is 18 seconds long. At the moment when the top floor starts moving, there is nothing supporting it. And the whole building is moving symmetrically. It's going all the way down, and building 7 was not hit by an airliner. Now, come on. Okay.
Yeah, I want to go back to your research in a sec, but let me just think, as you've raised that question, I want to sort of carry on with that. I mean, do you know of any controlled demolition that's ever been, where someone's used thermite as part of that?
No.
Was that surprising?
No. Well, it could be. It's not. I'm a scientist. Listen, and I'm reporting hard evidence. Why? And I'm asking honest. I'm answering your questions honestly.
So
I don't know.
Why would someone want to use thermite as well as a conventional explosive? Wouldn't a conventional explosive be enough?
Go and ask them. You're an investigative reporter. Go and ask them. They know.
Who's they?
Who brought down the World Trade Center?
And who would that be? I don't know. You haven't really given me a suggestion who that might be.
They are brilliant engineers. This is a masterpiece.
But who's they?
You find out, and we must have an investigation.
I can't see a motive, and I can't see a person who would want
That's
to carry
your
it out.
problem. You have a problem.
Well, I think you have as well, because you don't seem to be able to give me a suggestion of who might want to carry out and who might have done it.
Your problem will be solved when we get an investigation, and the grand jury will find out.
Okay, but you haven't got anyone in mind, right? Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. So, when you looked at the dust samples you had, the 4 dust samples, how much aluminium did you find?
How much? What do you mean?
Did you do a quantitative analysis of how much analysis?
But this is all actually. Oh, I don't remember the numbers, but this is already in the investigating done by the RGLE group.
No, in your dust, the dust that you did.
But the quantitative contest of aluminum is. Actually, the numbers are irrelevant because, we're taking out the chips. We're not considering the dust as a whole.
You're being selective and looking at those particular chips.
Of course.
But you didn't do, then on those chips, or in the dust, you didn't do any quantitative analysis?
No, because it's already, and this is what started the thing, it's the original report from the RGLE group, already in 2003 and 2004. And the United States Geological Survey came out in 2005. And they have a complete mapping of the World Trade Center dust, including and this is quite an extensive investigation, including the total aluminum content. And this is what started Professor Stephen Jones actually and triggered him to look into the dust. Also because in particular this is another finding which is very important. In the RJLE group from 2003, they reported the content of 5.87% iron spheres. These are small particles of iron which are completely round. They shouldn't be there.
Iron or iron oxide? Pure iron?
Iron.
Yeah.
Well, there's aluminum in it as well, because of the history of its formation, because it comes out in a reaction, in a thermite reaction. But the findings of these spheres on their own is the complete unambiguous proof the thermite was also applied during the demolition of the World Trade Center. And this is from 2003.
You did an analysis, looked at how much heat was released by when you heated the aluminium and the iron oxide and the red chips. How much heat was released by them?
Oh, it differs from chip to chip. This comes in.
You gave a range, didn't you?
In joules per gram. I
Yes.
think. Do you want me to?
Yes, please.
It differs actually. Kilojoules per gram, and the best one comes out at 8 kilojoules per gram as far as I see. And
It's 1.5 to 7.5, I thought.
Excuse me?
1.5 to 7.5, I thought was a range you had. Kilojoules per gram.
Yeah, right. So you know. Okay, very good.
Is that right?
Yeah, according to this, it's the same as this.
Okay. And did you look at any alternatives apart from thermite as being the cause for the red grade chip?
Yeah, we can't come up with any. That is.
Did you look at any? Did you look for any?
Of course.
So the scientists, did you look to see if there's any alternative
Of
explanations?
course.
Okay.
We try to come up with the best hypothesis. And it is all in what we call the scientific method.
What else do you look at then? What other alternatives do you look
Well,
at?
since I don't have any. Because
You don't have any?
No, what do you suggest?
You didn't have any alternatives?
Oh, like the paint, the primer paint. Oh, yes, sure, of course. But at that time, we did not have actual samples of the primer paint. We have that. We have achieved that later on, and it's in my office actually at the university. But at that time, what we had was a description of the primer paint, which is provided. It's in the NIST report, and there's a whole chapter actually on the primer paint, because you can use the primer paint as an indication of the thermal history of the steel beams, and it's very interesting on its own, because when the steel beams were covered by protective paint, and when you heat it up, it starts cracking. It's called mud cracking because it looks like cracked mud, and from the cracks you can actually determine the temperature of the thermal history of the beam. And NIST did not find any steel beams from the core of the towers which has been exposed to beyond 250 degrees centigrade from the primer paint.
And it's in the Twin Towers you're talking about now?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And it's the same number actually from 7. In spite of, most of the steel was actually, hurried away, which is forbidden to remove any evidence from a crime scene. But what the remains that NIST had for observation, none of them, according to the primer paint, had been beyond 250 degrees centigrade. Now this primer paint is described, and its thermal stability is also described, because NIST, or company, it's a private company, did experiments with the beams and heated them up and see what happens up to 800 degrees. And what happened is this mud cracking when you heat up the primer paint, and around 600 degrees it starts peeling off, and the polymer matrix starts charring, and actually this charring is more or less complete around 800 degrees. Now the point here is that the primer paint is stable. That's one thing. Another thing is the content of the primer paint, and I've actually done these calculations myself. is that the primer paint contains up to 30%, I have to be a little technical here, of zinc chromate, which is the protective agent of the primer paint. And we do not see that. And later on, we have achieved actual samples. It's not so easy, but we have got some samples of the primer paint, and they behave completely as expected. I have made experiments with it myself.
When you say the primer paint, you're basing on you've looked at one primer paint from the World Trade Center, is that right?
What do you mean?
I'm asking you how many examples of primer paint from the World Trade Center.
According to the NIST report, there is only one.
Right. I think there's only one used.
And the samples that we have received matches the NIST description. What more can I say?
Your paper, was it published in a leading journal and peer-reviewed?
No, it was published in what we call an open journal.
Mm-hmm. And peer-reviewed in that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And what was been the reaction by other scientists? Have you been challenged at all?
Zero. No, challenge, no, not really on the... some challenge on the methodology. People have asked, why haven't you done this, why haven't you done that? And this is, you can always say that.
But what's been the reaction of scientists to your conclusions?
None. None. It is beyond doubt the best peer-reviewed paper ever in my career. I would like to know how many times it has been downloaded, how many people have actually read it. Nobody has challenged your conclusions. You can always challenge the details of how the data were made, and this is fair enough. But when it comes down to it now, if you don't believe this, you don't believe that. So what is it? What is the red grey chips? Nobody has come up with a better hypothesis than ours.
Okay. I went to speak to Professor Richard Fruhan. He's a professor of metallurgical engineering at the Carnegie Mellon University with 50 years of experience in the field, associate editor of the leading journal Metallurgical and Materials Transactions Journal, which is peer-reviewed. And he says he's never heard of the journal you published in until I mentioned it to him. And he said himself, when he looked and read your report, your paper, he said he would never have published it, your article in his journal.
So what? What's the problem?
Someone who understands it, someone who's a metallurgical expert, says that he wouldn't publish it. He says that you made fundamental mistakes in your research.
Or he should publish that if we have made any fundamental mistakes. But maybe I should rather referring to the fact that you're taking in a person who say, I will not publish this. You must understand what has happened to academia in general since 9/11. Because it is a very, very bad career move to bring up 9/11 at all, to talk about it at the lunch table. And this journal we're talking about here, actually my dean was at the External Advisory Board. And his name is Anderson, so he was actually number one on the list. This was one of the 4 reasons for publishing in this paper. And
it's not a well-known paper, though, is it? A well-known journal.
No, but it has benefits, which I'm ready to explain. And one of them is...
It doesn't go on an abstract service, does it, to other scientists?
I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
Well, so what?
But leading journals would.
Yeah.
They would get a more rigorous peer review.
Yeah, but there are 3 reasons why the leading journal would not accept it, for several reasons. One of them is that it is very long. And in a journal which has a printed version, you would never be allowed to put in 33 color pictures. But most importantly to us is that it's an open journal. And you must understand that it is always the scientists who pay for the publication. No matter which kind of journal you're talking about, it's always the scientists paying, because there's the same people reading as there's the same people publishing. So if you pay for the journal by subscription, is basically the same thing as if you pay what we call a page charge. And sometimes you pay both, actually. You both pay for the subscription and you pay for the printing. There's always a scientist paying. But this concept, which is a little new, they tried to break the monopoly of the old journals, which had has pushed the subscription rates into what you would say very high levels and beyond reach of ordinary people. If you want to read a paper from one of the old conventional journals, you have either to be affiliated an institution or go to the library. It's beyond reach for any single individual to subscribe to this because they're simply too expensive. Now this new concept, which was endorsed by my dean, relies on a different mechanism because it's free. So point one, it's everyone can download it, and we wanted this to happen. Point two, it would never come out, have a printed version because there are too many illustrations. Point three, we kept the copyrights of all the pictures. We still have the copyrights. If you want to show a picture from this, you would have to ask me because I have the copyrights. But if it had been one of the other journals, you would have to ask the journal. So these are very good reasons for using this one.
Another person I spoke to there at the Carnegie Mellon University, Professor Christopher Pistorius, he says that nobody has bothered to take the time to look at this. It doesn't mean to say it's right, it just means it hasn't been proven wrong. And he said there are lots of reasons why nobody would take the time. It's frankly irrelevant. It would be fairly easy to rebut, but everybody has got more interesting things to do.
Okay, why are we sitting here?
The reasons they suggested that it was they had problems with your paper is, first of all, they said 20 years ago analysis like yours was done on a few particles, and now they do look at thousands, and within that they would do hundreds of analyses, and that's the sort of work that R.J. Lee or the US Geological Survey would do. They do, and they would do a quantitative analysis as they go. You based on taking 4 samples and then specifically looking out for certain things. They suggest that's not the way science in this way now works.
Bring us the samples. NIST won't give us any.
No, they're saying the way you conducted your own survey of the material, even the samples, take it as read that the samples even are correct and they've been corrected in the right way. They would challenge that, they would suggest that they weren't, they aren't. But however, take it that you've got samples there. The way you've analysed it, they're saying, is wrong. It's an outdated way of looking at it. It's being selective.
Well, do they accept that?
And they don't do as many, and you don't do, it's selective and you don't do as many calculations as others would do.
Do they accept the data?
They look at it and suggest that there are plenty of other good reasons as to what it might be.
Wonderful. Why don't they present them?
Well, they say the most likely source of aluminium in the red chips is paint, specialised cured paint.
Why don't they? So you think that why don't they come up with their suggestion and publish it? And do you think that?
Well, I had them. They done an interview with me, and they said it's specialised cured paint.
So why didn't you ask them the reason for putting paint on the World Trade Center, which it actually contradicts what was there, but which was?
I'll give you it. Professor Christopher Pistorius, who's an expert in this type of paint.
You should go and publish that.
Yeah, he said there was this type of paint was in use at the World Trade Center. He also suggests that there were lots of different types of paint of this type of primer paint being used, not just one, because there's lots of different types, and so you might have got one sample, but there are lots of others. The type that includes.
May I come in?
Yeah, okay, come in.
Because there are paint in the dust. There are paint samples in the dust, but they don't react.
There's lots of different compositions of paint, is what he's making.
It's contradicting the NIST report. But why don't he publish this? If he claims this, he's in contradiction with the NIST report. He's contradiction with our findings. We have published it.
You don't think there were lots of different types of paint being used at
Not according to the NIST report. Tell us about it.
It's listed in the buildings. You could actually go back and look at the buildings. The type of
Okay,
right. I'll carry on. I mean, I don't think you quite answered this question. Which just ask you again. Is what they were saying is that rather than taking a few particles and doing analysis on that, they suggested that the modern technique is to do much larger quantitative analysis and do many more samples and many more analysis within those samples.
Yeah.
Weren't you being selective?
But
Weren't you being selective?
yeah, we are selecting the red grape chips from the dust, of course.
Trying to find something out rather than being objective.
What should we?
You had a conclusion in mind when you did it.
Yeah. Please, a scientific work and a scientific paper is a set of data and a discussion and the best hypothesis of the day, and that's what it is.
That's what they suggested.
And if they're asking for more, and
Professor Fruhan, let me give you what Professor Fruhan said
Yeah.
to me. He said, if you showed me a pile of dust, I could find almost anything in there, but maybe not in a large quantity. You should do more of a quantitative analysis when you look at essentially 1,000 such particles and analyse those with XRD to get a true analysis of what the material is. You could always find something in a pile of dust, and that proves your point. But it would be extremely small, and could be a lot of other explanation for it as well. You saying anything so?
well, why don't you present the other explanations and publish it, please? I mean, you're reading for a piece of paper. It really doesn't count. The only thing which counts in science are published data.
Contrary views don't count.
But he has to stand up. What is missing, basically, or generally, in all this whole discussion about the science thing and the demolition of the towers, is a discussion in a gathering, in a room of peers. And I have tried repeatedly here locally in Denmark, at the technical university, to ask for a symposium or a hearing, whatever you call it, where actually people can discuss this in plenum, in a group where the
But here's someone giving you a specific explanation and challenging the methods you've used and the conclusions you've reached, and you dismiss it for another reason. Because this time, I like that you dismiss the witness at the Pentagon or a witness at the World Trade Center. This one's dismissed because he hasn't published it.
I shrug my shoulders because he's not saying anything. Basically, maybe we should point at that. He's not saying anything. He's asking for more. So what? I'm asking: does he recognize the data? Does he accept the data? Did you ask him that question? You asked him.
He looked through your paper
And did he accept the data?
He looked through it and saw that there was an alternative explanation for it.
So, and what was that?
They suggest, the two of them suggest, that it was specialised cured paint. The type of paint that's used, actually specified and used at the moment on the Manhattan Bridge. Did you know that?
Please, why doesn't he publish that?
It's a primer coat used and specified by the New York Department of Transport. Did you know that?
No.
Widely used in New York.
Pardon?
It's widely used in New York. Did you know that?
So you suggest that you have a paint which actually reacts at 430 degrees and produces iron in the process? Is that what you're suggesting?
That if you heat it, then it gives off, eventually it will give off some heat, yes.
It means that if in a fire, it would be the quite opposite of fireproof.
Why do people use things like micaceous iron oxide with polymers and aluminium flake? Why do you think they use that? Does it have a purpose? Why do you think they use those aluminium flakes and micaceous iron oxide?
Excuse me?
Why they use those specialised primer flakes? Do you know why they're being used?
No.
Do you think you don't know why they're being used?
I think what you're suggesting is the application of a paint which is a semi-explosive.
It's being used by the New York Department of Transport at the moment.
Okay. Why don't you?
Why do you think they use it?
Well,
To prepare for future attacks in New York? Are you suggesting, or
prepare for future.
is that what you're suggesting? I mean,
I'm
it's
not-
being used at the moment on actual buildings at the moment.
I'm not-
It's the exact type of paint with aluminium in it. So what? But you don't seem to understand why they use it. It's used for. I explain. I mean, it's used for. It is used for its to stop corrosion. It's meant to. It's primer barrier to stop water getting into iron steelwork. That's why it is. I thought you might have known things. You might have looked at alternatives, but you don't.
We're looking for the primer paint.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay, you don't.
Hey.
Okay.
We have looked at the primer paint
Yeah.
applied in wood.
You've looked at one. primer paint.
We looked at the NIST report,
Yeah.
which made an account for the primer.
Right.
Okay,
You looked at
that's
that.
one thing.
Yeah.
And we have obtained authentic samples of the primer paint from the steel beams, and they perfectly, what you say, fit the description in the NIST report, and that is the basis of our conclusions, of course.
And Professor Christopher Pistorius states very clearly that in an area like the World Trade Center, there would be a whole series of different primer paints used,
Why
not
does-
just one.
So why is it not in the NIST report, and why doesn't he come up with it?
Well, he did come up to me and he did explain it to me. If you heat a cured paint with polymer iron oxide aluminium, like the one we're talking about, heat will be released, yes? The polymer will burn, the aluminium will react with iron oxide, and the heat released by it, according to your paper, is around about 1.5 to 7.5 kilojoules per gram. That's the scientific calculation for it. How does that amount, what does that compare to a typical office fire? What do you think is the amount of heat being released by that in the same?
I have no answer.
Don't you?
After the burning of coal,
No, just take an office fire. Quite important to say, because you're saying it's got some special characteristics, this.
Yeah, but the point here is
Now
not.
that's the question. How much, in comparison to an office fire, is being released in terms of energy? The same calculation.
I don't know actually, but I probably you'll get more out of the office fire because when coal burns,
Yes, it's
when
twice
coal-
as much as the
Yeah.
most. So it's 15
Yeah.
kilojoules per gram.
Yeah.
That's twice as much as
Yeah,
from your supposedly dangerous compound.
No, you haven't understood.
I've understood perfectly. And there's more energy being released out of an office fire
I'm sorry.
than there is out of this supposedly highly dangerous material.
I have to then entertain you a little bit about basic chemistry, because what you are referring to is the combustion of carbon, basically furniture, trees, wood, okay, in air. So there are two components in that reaction, and that is the carbon in the wood and the air. And it is a very slow reaction. It's true that more energy is released, but it's very slow. So over the time, probably, actually, it's true, more energy is comparable, twice as much is comparable. It is more energy is reduced when you burn carbon, but it's what we call a diffuse fire. It's burning from the surface. So you can never reach temperatures of 1538 degrees centigrade, which is the melting point of iron. Do you have a stove? Have you ever seen a stove? Have you ever seen it melt when you put in wood in the stove? Have you ever seen that? No, of course not. You cannot melt iron in ordinary office fire. You are at least eventually 1,000 degrees below the melting point of iron. So come on. You are referring apples and oranges.
It's an inconvenient fact for you. That
Yeah,
it
but it's-
produces more. I mean, in fact, NIST actually says that the office substation they looked at produces 17 to 20 kilojoules per gram.
Yeah, but you would
That's,
never...
that's nearly 3 times as
Time
much
is-
as energy is being released by your supposedly highly energetic material.
Time is an issue. And the point is the temperature you reach within time. The thermite reaction brings its own reactants, and it reacts very fast. So that's why you get a temperature of 2,500 degrees centigrade. Now in office fire, unless you blow in oxygen, you don't get beyond, say, 700 degrees centigrade. You are roughly 800 to 900 degrees below the melting point of iron. So your point is irrelevant.
Is their point?
Your point is irrelevant. Yeah, but there are many irrelevant points in the NIST report.
Well, they don't think it is. They're experts in metallurgy, world experts in metallurgy. They don't think it is irrelevant. But I guess you'll dismiss them
Trust yourself.
because they say something contrary to you. The temperature at which it started to react was what when these red grey chips? What temperature?
430.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would you expect it if it was thermite?
Oh, actually, there's no. It's very hard to find ignition temperatures on thermite.
But it wouldn't be that, would it? It wouldn't be 430.
No, as a conventional thermite it can be ignited old time. Hans Goldschmidt, old time thermite, can be ignited by various means, and it's very difficult to find well-defined ignition temperatures.
But it wouldn't be 430, would it?
Definitely not. It's much higher.
Right.
But the point here is, what I believe, and we also said that the polymer matrix helps along for the relatively low, and actually it's burning. So it helps along to the low ignition temperature. But it's characteristic for nanothermite.
Yeah.
You know, it has been produced. We have made nanothermite ourselves independently, following the recipes from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And it takes off at these low temperatures.
And guess what? If you burn the paint that they're talking about, the primer paint they look at, it would burn out exactly around about 430 to 450 degrees centigrade.
No.
Well, Professor Christopher Pistorius from Carnegie Mellon says it would.
Yeah, but I have made experiments with primer paint from the towers.
You've made experiments on one.
As a few, but I have made experiments on authentic primer paint from the towers. I've heated it up, and I promise you, nothing happens until 800 degrees, and what you have left is black tar. Combustion.
Okay. So, there you have two of the world's leading experts in metallurgy produce A, questioning the methods you've used, and B, suggesting a completely harmless but much more plausible and more likely reason for the red-grey chips and the characteristics within them. Why don't you accept what they say?
Because I want to meet them face to face, and I want them to publish this. I don't take your report for it. You as go in between here. Maybe you made this up on your way down here.
I made it up.
Yeah, it could be. How do I know? I want to meet them. I want them to publish and come out in the public domain and say what they're saying. Provide their evidence. Why don't they provide their evidence? I'm talking about evidence all the time.
But they've done an interview with me. Do you think that I made that up? Or?
No.
You seem to suggest they did.
No, I'm just saying that I'm, of course, ready. Why don't they invite me or any of the other authors to their university and let us, each of us, give a presentation?
Because they say it's irrelevant. They say it's not worth further study. They wouldn't have published your paper in their journal. They don't think it's of the right standard. That's why.
That's a very personal thing, isn't it?
Well, it's not. It's a question. You're a scientist. You're saying it's got the right standard. They say it hasn't got the right standard.
Okay.
If he peer reviewed it, he would have rejected it. He said Professor Fruhan.
Okay.
Well, that's pretty serious, isn't it?
No, it is not.
A professor of 50 years' experience in metallurgy, one of the world's leading experts in exactly this field. It's not your field, is it? Your field is not metallurgy.
I'm in nanoscience, but it is true.
But your field is not metallurgy, is it?
Why doesn't your professor?
Is it? Is it your field metallurgy?
No.
He is. He's got 50 years' experience, but yet again, you say that either I made it up, or that for some other reason you would suggest you don't want to listen to a leading expert in the field.
Of course I will.
This is absurd.
But where is he? I'm not listening to him.
I just quoted exact quotes of what he said.
Very good. So let him come out in the public domain.
The standard's never quite good enough for you, is it? When someone has something that's contradictory, it's never quite good enough for you, is it?
But he hasn't presented himself to me. You're a go-between between him and I. Okay, him and me. Okay? So I suggest that your professor publish and defend his statement in the public domain. Why is
he has put it in the public domain. He's just done an interview with BBC, hasn't he?
Why is he
pretty clearly in the public domain, isn't it?
Why is he hiding?
I don't think he's hiding anything.
And he's saying that it is not worth written.
Well, he wouldn't have published it. He just said, I asked him a question, would you have published it in your journal? He said, no, I wouldn't. If I peer reviewed it, I would have rejected it.
Okay.
Because it wasn't up to the correct standards of science. It's not how we do that sort of research now. It might have been 30 years ago. It isn't now, and he disagrees with your conclusion. He said you were being selective.
Well, why? I still suggest that he come up with his criticism following the standard rituals, routes for doing that, instead of actually giving it an interview, as you claim, with BBC. Again.
So you suggesting I claim as an interview or what?
Please, let me repeat.
Well, that's why you've decided to record the interview. I mean, you're saying things that I don't accept. I don't claim there's an interview. There was an interview. There was an interview, and I've given you exact quotes of what someone said. And yet again, you're not willing to accept what someone said.
I haven't taken a position on that.
Right. Okay.
I'm saying that what is needed here is a public hearing among peers. Because when you take in any single individual, and that goes for me too, in an interview, you can get any opinion you want out there. This has happened, it's true. This is something which has happened to academia, and I can explain to you why, because it's based on the funding system and the whole thing.
They never heard of your paper. I asked them a question about it, they answered. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. They gave you an answer you didn't like, so you dismiss it.
What is needed?
Pretty simple to me. No. You don't like things that seem to contradict your point of view.
No, I'm saying let's take the decision into a peer a forum of peers where we can discuss things, and where somebody are presenting their opinion, because you have to bring people together in order to have a proper scientific discussion. We should not discuss with any relays. That's what I'm saying. What I'm calling for is a scientific symposium on 9/11 science, and this could be an issue. And I'm suggesting your professor to invite me or Professor Jones or Kevin Ryan or either one of us, preferably together, at a symposium at his institute, and let's talk it over together with his colleagues.
I know a person who's from a completely different end of the spectrum, who's helped found Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Professor James Fetzer says that he suggests that nanothermite only becomes explosive if it's combined with explosives, which is true. It's an incendiary. And the same is true of toothpaste. If you combine toothpaste with an explosive, then it becomes an explosive. The inherent characteristic of thermite is an incendiary, not an explosive.
We don't know. We don't know where the red grey chips fit into the demolition picture of the World Trade Center. We know that incendiaries were used, and I can come up with a list of 10 other observations, which each of them unambitiously imply the application of thermite.
How could someone have got into the World Trade Center and planted a...
Let me finish.
It's fairly important.
Let me finish.
Okay, we'll answer that question next.
And we can bring to that access to the tower things afterwards. So, we know that incendiaries were used. They must, by necessity, have been thermitic. We also know that explosives were used simply from the cause of collapse. They could have been thermitic, because modern explosives are based on these very same reactions. It's called composite materials. They are based on these reactions. But we do not know where the red grey chips fit in. They could. Probably more than one kind of thermite was applied. But then we have to talk about sulfidation of the steel. But so we do not know where the red grey chips fit in. The only thing we know is that they shouldn't be there, and it is thermitic material because iron is being formed in the process.
Have you done any calculations on the size of the building and working out the size of the steel and how much thermite would have needed to bring down that building?
A lot. No, because it's...
Quite a lot, isn't it, actually?
Yeah, tons.
Tons?
Yeah.
And no one saw anything untoward in Building 7? No pre-cutting, no storing of tons of thermite, highly reactive, as you say?
How do you know?
Because I've not found anyone. Have you found anyone who said anything? Saw sort of someone carrying tons of thermite into the building, placing them by girders, ripping off fireproofing, placing them in all the key positions that you would in a controlled demolition?
Again,
Have you found anyone?
well, if you found anyone, would you report it in the BBC?
I certainly would.
Okay, but I think
Have you found anyone?
no. But I can tell you that the access to the towers has been very well documented by Kevin Ryan. This is one of the co-authors of this paper, and I would suggest that you read some of his essays on the way he is very. It is not difficult to get into the towers, and the key thing here is to get access to the steel structure.
But you're talking about taking in tons, as you accept, tons
on
of
pallets.
thermite
On pallets. No, and explosives. I don't.
and explosives all over.
Yeah.
Rigging the place with explosives,
Yes.
wiring,
Yes.
and no one saw it.
Why do you
That's
know?
really, it's
How do
just
you know?
absurd. Isn't it?
How you know? What you know is that nobody reported it. Okay, that's a different thing. Because of course somebody saw it. And that you don't have to, if you have a pallet with explosives and you're bringing them into World Trade Center, you do not write on the side explosives for demolition, would you? You would just bring them in.
Professor Fetzer also suggests that the nanothermite has been oversold, he said, to the 9/11 community. It's been grossly exaggerated, and that Stephen Jones and people like yourself who work with them have been infatuated with thermite.
Well, you might say, I would rather say that nanothermite is just one in a whole series of observations and findings. Each of them is in contradiction with the official version of events. And that is true. That is true. I mean, the free fall and the stand down of the Air Force is, and just to mention two, is just as violating the official account. So in that sense, I agree. The nanothermite should be seen in a context. Along with all the other observations, the thermite was used. I mentioned the ionospheres. There's no way that could be explained without the application of thermite. Molten iron was pouring out of the South Tower prior to collapse, and iron melts at 1538 degrees centigrade. Molten iron was observed in the rubble after the collapses. It took 3 months to put out the fires in the rubble.
Who saw the molten iron in the...
I have counted at least 23 witnesses, and there's photographic evidence of that.
Well, I spoke to one of those people I spoke to several of those people who it's been suggested have been evidence of that. One is the controlled demolition expert, Mark Loiseau. Another is Professor Hassan Astaneh, who's a structural engineer at Berkeley, California. Both of those have been suggested that they said it. When you actually go to speak to them, they say something else. They saw the rubble afterwards smouldering, and it had been smouldering, and there had been fires below the surface in the rubble.
So
It hardly suggests that there is molten iron flowing through. And no, I've not found anyone who actually says it.
well, you should ask NASA then. Did you ask them? Because they flew over.
I've seen it. I've seen the temperature that happens at the high temperatures afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 750 degrees. 6 days after 6 days of showers, it was pouring down cats and dogs.
And what's under the ground in the debris? Is it material that could burn?
It actually kept on burning for 3 months.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
It took them officially. The fires were.
Is there any combustible material in the dust, in the debris from the World Trade Center? Do you think any combustible material at all?
Not which can keep on burning for 3 months. You need oxygen. You need oxygen to do that.
Yeah.
And there were eruptions of strange chemicals coming out on specific days. I have to then use some technical terms.
Eruptions?
Yeah. They were like volcanoes. There were chemicals coming out of the ground on very limited time of them, like explosions were going on down in the rubble. And we are talking about, I have to give you some chemical names, styrene, benzene, toluene, and some very strange chemical called 1,3-diphenylpropane, which has never been observed after conventional fires. Why should it take 3 months to put out these fires and all the fires? Why should it take 3 months? Something was happening in ground zero, which is beyond the official story.
One, the FBI special agent I spoke to said that she says the continued doubting of what happened is unfair to the families and friends and belittles those who lost their lives on 9/11 and obscures the real story of what happened.
Don't think that the family and friends deserve to have a real investigation of what happened.
She doesn't, no.
She doesn't. Don't you think that it would be fair to the family and friends to have an investigation?
Well, I'm
of the
asking what
crime?
she says. She says she felt.
Yeah, but this is a very personal thing.
It was personal to her. Someone who's gathered up body parts of people who have been killed there. She felt quite hurt by the fact that you and others continue to question whether people actually on that airline were killed there.
Of course they were killed. Of course they were killed.
So earlier you seem to be suggesting the airliner didn't crash at the Pentagon.
Of course people were killed.
Quite clear, but
Of course people were killed.
right.
And we are talking about that this crime was never investigated. And you may have your own opinion, but I think that we honor these people who were murdered best by carrying out a criminal investigation and persecuting the perpetrators.
Do you think by doing what you do, you take presumably what you're saying is a gross crime? Do you think you're taking a personal risk yourself by coming up with doing the work you're doing?
I have no way back. If you fight, you might lose. But if you don't fight, you have lost.
And you'll keep fighting?
I have no way back. I have 6 grandchildren, and what is going on here, in my opinion, is our very civilization which is at stake. There is no way that our civilization can continue without facing these unsolved questions of 9/11.
So
I think this is very serious. I'm talking about all the things you love. I'm talking about democracy. I'm talking about welfare. I'm talking about the elderly. I'm talking about the children. I'm talking about economy. I'm talking about environment. I'm talking about the very future of our Western society and our civilization. And I'm very concerned, and I think there is no way our children can expect a future like ours unless we face the unsolved questions of 9/11.
Okay, cut.
Do you have any children?
I do,
You
yeah.
have children.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
That's why we're here today.
I would always look to and desperately in search of the truth in every story I ever do. And that's the only question.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I need to sign a release form.
So what do you sign?
What do I sign? I sign up to the Charter, the BBC's Charter and the Ofcom. The crucial point of what you're agreeing to is that it is an edited programme. You need to understand it's an edited programme because it's a BBC 2 programme, and it is a programme about 9/11 and the theories about it. Okay.
or translate your constitution and you waive irrevocably any moral rights you may have in them?
We have you. The point is, we have the copyright in the interview because we broadcast it because we have to be able to broadcast it to. We give it to other people. It's a program that's made by the BBC and is sold worldwide. It goes out worldwide.
Yeah. But you have
So we have to have the copyright to be able to do that. That's what it says.
You have your copyright of your own footage.
That's what it's saying. Yes.
And you don't have the copyright of our
Well,
footage.
I'm not taking that tape, am I? I'm using my tape. Yes.
Okay. But maybe that should be specified.
No, you don't need to specify. Well, you can add a note, but it's clearly talking about our interview.
No, it's talking about.
Thank you. Contribution is clearly the tape that I've got. I can't take your tape because you haven't given it to me, or you won't give it to me. It doesn't, and it's going to be exactly the same anyway. But if you want to make that point, it's perfectly fine because it won't make any difference at all. Because clearly it's about talking about the interview you gave me on record. And to be clear, while you're filming us as well, I wouldn't talk about anything off the record, and wouldn't normally have people filming while I'm talking about things that are off the record. So that's absolutely clear again. Maybe state it, yes, however you want to. Do you want to do that first, and I can? Do you want to scan that, or I can fax it to you from London? Or I can give you a copy of that as it is, and then I'll send you I'll fax you the site.
I think I'll add the thing about your footage, your tape. So your contributions. You signed to the BBC the copyright to and all the rights in your contributions. But is that really true that this is the footage? This is the tape actually of your machine?
Yes, tape on my machine. Yeah. The interview you gave.
Why is it then your contributions?
It's just it's using it as a phrase to describe how you've contributed to the program. So it's saying, and seeing as we work in the broadcast media, your contribution has to be in a broadcast medium, and that is tape. I can't see any other explanation for it.
Is footage an English word? Or is it American? Can I write the copyright to your footage?
Recorded by the BBC.
Yeah. Facts. I only have facts.
Okay.
Well, you can
I can scan it and
scan it and send me a PDF.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.